Hello everyone, hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're diving into the moment Truong's mother arrives in the rain and reveals a secret from inside his agency that could threaten everything they've built. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next video. The first drizzle of the day catches them right as they turn back onto the small path leading home. It's not a storm, not even close, just that soft, early rain that feels like the sky is testing the ground. Tap, 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 like someone lightly knocking on the roof of a house. Truong shifts the bundle of thin branches on his shoulder and glances down at Tieu, who's happily dragging a small bag that clinks and bumps with every step. Inside the bag, 2 pomelos and a couple of oranges. Tieu insisted on carrying, all by myself. Careful, Truong says, slowing his pace so he stays right beside him. Don't drag it too hard. And don't kneel down in the mud, okay? Tieu looks up with that serious little face kids make when they want to prove they're listening. I won't kneel, he promises, like it's an oath. Truong almost laughs. Almost, because the truth is, it's such a small sentence. Such a small moment, but it lands in his chest like something heavy and warm. He watches Tieu's shoes step around a puddle, barely missing it, and a sudden memory flashes through Truong's mind. A different rainy day, years ago, when he wasn't here, when he couldn't be here, when he was stuck chasing things that felt urgent back then, and now only feel like distance. For a second, his grip tightens around the branches. He hates how time works, how it moves forward no matter what you do, no matter what you fix, no matter what you regret. You can't rewind. You can't replace the days you missed. But then Tieu laughs, bright, clear, fearless, because one orange rolls slightly in the bag and bumps the other like it's playing. And that laugh pulls Truong back into now, back into the drizzle, back into the only time that still belongs to him. When they reach the yard, Truong sets the branches down near the trellis frame he's been working on. The structure isn't fancy, just practical wood tied and braced the way it needs to be so climbing plants can grow without falling. It's the kind of thing you build when you plan to stay. Tieu immediately squats beside the bag and starts pulling the fruit out one by one, like he's unpacking treasure. Truong shakes his head, half amused, half worried. Hey, hands clean. And don't kneel. Tieu pauses, then carefully shifts from a kneel to a squat, like he's correcting himself in slow motion. Like this? Yes, Truong says, smiling now. Like that. The drizzle thickens a little, enough to make the leaves shine. Raindrops slide down the edges like tiny glass beads. The whole yard looks softened, like the world's edges have been blurred. Truong picks up the pruning tool and starts cutting branches to fit the trellis. Snip, pause, snip. The work is simple, repetitive. The kind of work that gives your mind space to wander. But today, Truong doesn't wander far. His eyes keep drifting back to Tieu. Tieu lines up the fruit along the ground, then rearranges them, then stacks them, then pretends one pomelo is a big round animal and the oranges are its babies. He's speaking softly to himself, making little sound effects under his breath. Truong catches a few words. Don't be scared. Papa is here. And Truong's hand stills, just for a moment. He stares at his son like he's hearing a miracle. Tieu isn't looking at him. Tieu isn't trying to impress him. He's just playing, just being a child. But in that tiny pretend world, the role Tieu gives him is clear. Papa is here. Truong swallows and forces his hand back into motion. Snip. He tells himself it's just play, but his heart doesn't believe that. Because for a man who's carried too much fear, too many secrets, too many nights, where he wondered if his life would split apart at the seams, hearing his child say that so naturally feels like being forgiven without even asking. The cold weather presses in, that kind of damp chill that sneaks through clothes. Yet somehow the yard feels warm with laughter, warm with small voices, warm with the sound of work being done for the sake of a home. Truong realizes something while he cuts. Every time he speaks to Tieu, every reminder, every be careful, every don't do that, every watch your step. It isn't nagging, it's love. It's the kind of love that comes from fear, yes, but not fear of control, fear of loss. He keeps cutting branches, but his thoughts shift, quietly, like a door opening. For so long, he's lived with his shoulders tight, always bracing for the next threat, the next problem, the next hidden danger. And now he's standing in a yard in the rain, building something simple while his child plays with fruit. That contrast hits him. It's almost ridiculous how peaceful it looks, like one of those slow, cinematic scenes where the camera focuses on raindrops rolling off leaves, then pans to a child's smile, then lands on a father's hands working steadily. Truong feels his chest tremble, not with panic this time, but with something else. Appreciation, gratitude, a quiet kind of awe. He watches Tieu grow in front of him, not in dramatic leaps, but in tiny details. How Tieu balances without falling, how he listens when reminded, how he creates stories out of ordinary objects. Truong thinks, suddenly, of all the ways a child grows when you're not paying attention, and his stomach tightens with regret. He missed too much. But then he hears another laugh, and it's like the present reaches out and grabs him again. Not to punish him, to anchor him, to say, "You're here now." And still he feels warmer than he has in years. A door creaks behind him. He turns slightly, expecting Tieu. She's stepping carefully into the yard, holding an umbrella that's already dripping along the edges. Her hair is neatly tied back, and she has that familiar expression, concern wrapped in strength, love disguised as seriousness. In one arm, she carries a bag clearly full of things. In the other, she holds a small box like it's something precious. Tieu sees her first. "Grandma!" he shouts, and immediately stands, then remembers Truong's warning and tries to avoid kneeling even while running. It's a little awkward, like a baby deer learning balance. "There's my boy," she says, and she lowers herself to hug him properly, not caring about the damp ground at all. "Did you miss Grandma?" Tieu nods hard. "Yes, look, pomelo, orange." Truong's mother laughs, a real laugh, and the sound feels like it belongs in the house itself. She reaches into her bag and pulls out small cakes first, soft, wrapped neatly, and then tangerines, and then a couple of boxes of milk. "For you," she tells Tieu, and her voice is thick with affection. "So you grow strong." Tieu's eyes widen like he's been given treasure from a king. Truong steps forward, his instincts suddenly alert, even though this is family. "Mum," he says, respectful, steady. "You came in the rain." His mother waves it off, but her gaze shifts past him, straight toward the door, like she's already looking for Tieu. "And where is she?" his mother asks. Immediately, the pregnant one shouldn't be doing too much. Is she resting? Just hearing that pregnant one makes Truong's chest tighten again. It's still new, still fragile, still something he's afraid to breathe too hard around. "She's inside," Truong says. "She was cooking earlier. I told her to sit down, but you know her." His mother hums, as if she already knows exactly what kind of girl Tieu is. And in that moment, standing under the drizzle with his mother holding his child and gifts in her arms, Truong feels a shift inside himself. For so long, he's carried secrets alone. For so long, he thought protection was only his job. But here she is, his mother. And for the first time in a long time, Truong feels something loosen in his chest. Not because the world is suddenly safe, but because he's not alone in wanting it to be. Inside the house, warmth glows from the doorway. The smell of cooking drifts out something comforting. Something home. The rain taps on the porch roof like gentle applause, and for a brief, trembling moment, Truong allows himself to believe maybe this is what a family is supposed to feel like. Maybe hope doesn't have to be loud. Maybe it can be as simple as warm milk, small cakes, and a grandmother's arms around a laughing child. Tieu appeared in the doorway with a dish towel in her hands, moving a little slower than usual, careful, measured. The moment she saw Truong's mother, her face softened into that respectful smile she always wore around elders. "Mom," she said gently, "you came in the rain." Truong's mother waved it off, but her eyes immediately dropped to Tieu's belly, as if checking on it before even checking on the house. "How are you feeling? Any dizziness? Any nausea? Are you eating enough?" she asked in one breath. Tieu chuckled, slightly embarrassed. "I'm okay." Truong watches me like I'll disappear if he blinks. Truong, who was taking off his damp jacket, cleared his throat and pretended not to hear. Tieu giggled, cheeks full of cake. His grandmother clicked her tongue. Men need to learn. Inside, the air felt warm and safe. The rain became background music, tapping on the porch roof like soft fingers. The table was already set, simple food, but clearly made with care. Peanut sticky rice shining under the lamp, chicken soup still steaming, and cabbage rolls lined up neatly like little presents. Truong's mother paused the moment she saw the meal. Her face, usually so strict, melted into something close to pride. "This is the kind of food that keeps a family standing," she said, sitting down. Tieu pulled out a chair for her. "Please, sit. You must be cold." Tieu didn't wait for anyone. He climbed onto his seat and stared at the food like it was a festival. Truong leaned closer to him. "Slow," he warned softly. "Chew." Tieu nodded seriously and then took an even bigger bite. She started filling Dewey's bowl like she'd been waiting all week to do it. One cabbage roll, a small piece of chicken. Then she pushed the milk closer. "Eat properly," she said. "You're growing." Tieu beamed like he'd been awarded a medal. The house filled with small sounds that made Truong's chest ache in a good way. Chopsticks tapping, soup being poured, Tieu's happy humming, and Tieu's soft laughter when Truong's mother praised her food. Truong's mother took a bite of sticky rice, chewed, then nodded with approval. "Perfect. Not too dry. The peanuts are roasted properly. I'm glad you like it." As they ate, Truong caught himself watching everything the way Tieu sat with her hands, sometimes resting over her belly without thinking, the way Tieu leaned into Truong's side every time he laughed, the way his mother's eyes kept returning to Tieu like she was silently counting her breaths. For a moment, Truong forgot the cold outside, the pressure, the old fear that used to live in his bones. Here, at this table, life felt unbelievably simple, and that simplicity hit him like a turning point. He used to think happiness had to be earned through winning, through surviving, through forcing the world to back down. But right now, happiness looked like warm soup and family teasing and a child eating too fast. Then Tieu stood, reaching for the soup pot. Truong immediately rose with her, too quickly. "I'm not made of glass." Truong lowered his voice. "I know, but I'm carrying a baby," she finished gently, "not a curse. Let me do small things. Let her move. If you lock her down, she'll get weaker." Truong blinked, caught off guard. He expected his mother to scold Tieu for standing. Instead, she corrected him. He nodded once, quietly. "Okay." Tieu refilled the soup slowly. Truong stood close, not touching her, but ready. When she sat back down, Tieu clapped once like she'd performed a magic trick. Everyone laughed again, and the warmth returned. But it didn't last. Not because anyone did something wrong, just because Truong's mother had something heavy in her chest, and she couldn't keep it there forever. After the meal, Tieu brought tea. Tieu was busy peeling a tangerine, sticky fingers working hard, completely absorbed. Truong's mother held her cup but didn't drink. "Truong," she said. One word and Truong felt the air change. His posture straightened instinctively, like an old reflex waking up. "Yes, Mom?" Tieu's smile faded. She sat quietly, hands folded, sensing this wasn't casual conversation. Even the rain outside sounded louder suddenly, like it was leaning into the window to listen. Truong's mother took a slow breath. "I didn't come only to bring gifts," she said. "I came because there's something you need to know." Truong didn't speak. He waited. "Back then," she continued, her voice steady, "when you were harmed, it wasn't random." Tieu's eyes widened. Her fingers tightened together. Truong's jaw clenched. He felt that old memory surge pain, confusion, and the sick feeling of realizing someone wanted him gone. Someone inside your agency pushed you out. They couldn't control you. They couldn't predict you. So they used dirty methods. Tieu whispered, shocked. Inside his agency, Truong exhaled slowly, forcing calm. "Mum, why tell me now?" "Because you have a family now," she answered immediately. "That child should never pay for your past." Tieu looked up for a second, sensing tension, then returned to his tangerine like the world was still kind. That innocence almost hurt to see. Truong's voice went low. I want peace. I want to live quietly with them. His mother didn't soften. And you think they'll let you? Silence settled over the table. Truong hated that the question didn't feel hypothetical. He clenched his hands under the table. I can handle it. His mother shook her head once. You handled everything alone for too long. That's how you almost died. Tieu reached for Truong's arm. Her touch trembled, but it grounded him. Truong. He turned slightly toward her, and his expression immediately softened. I'm okay, he murmured. I'm here. His mother watched that exchange, and her voice dropped, quieter but sharper. Quietly, carefully, I assigned people to monitor. Not loud ones, just eyes that know how to watch. Truong's gaze flickered. Part of him wanted to reject it to keep darkness outside this home. But another part of him felt something he didn't want to admit. Relief. He was tired. Tired of carrying the past like a weapon that never stopped cutting him. I just want a simple life, he said, almost like a confession. His mother's face softened for the first time since the topic began. Then protect it, she replied. Those words landed hard. Truong felt the internal shift, the point where he stopped trying to erase the past and started accepting that peace sometimes needs guarding. Forgetting wasn't the same as being safe. Ignoring wasn't the same as winning. He looked at his mother, then at Tieu, then at Diep. Truong placed a hand on his head, fingers smoothing gently, like he could shield him with touch alone. Truong swallowed. Then he nodded. Okay, he said quietly. Tell me what you know. Tieu exhaled shakily, her eyes shining. Truong's mother nodded once, satisfied, not triumphant, just determined. Outside, the rain continued, steady and cold. And even though a shadow had entered the room, it couldn't erase what they'd built tonight: food, laughter, and love that felt like light. As Truong listened, he realized something else too. His strongest shield wasn't his past. It wasn't his training. It was the people sitting right here, choosing each other, protecting each other, refusing to let fear be the only thing they inherited. As the first drizzle falls, Truong keeps working in the yard, trimming branches for a trellis, while Dew happily plays with pomelos and oranges. Truong's gentle warnings: be careful. Don't kneel in the mud, carry quiet regret for the time he once lost, and new gratitude for the life he's building. The rain thickens when Truong's mother arrives with cakes, tangerines, and milk for Dew, plus heartfelt concern for pregnant Tieu. Inside, warmth replaces the cold as they share peanut sticky rice, chicken soup, and cabbage rolls, laughing and feeding Dewy until the house feels like a safe world. Then the mood shifts. Truong's mother reveals a hidden threat. Someone inside Truong's agency previously harmed him to force him out. Truong wants to bury the past, but she insists on protection, pushing him to accept vigilance for their family's future at last.